And we are live. So good morning, everybody. This is the meeting of the Right of Way Use Committee. It's an ad hoc committee of the Mayor Commission. It is Friday, October 3rd, and we are kicking it off at 9:07. Apologies for residents who may be watching for our late start, but we have a quorum. So we're going to first start off with approval of the agenda. I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the agenda with amendment to add an item to approve the September 23rd, 2025 minutes following approval of the agenda. If I could have a motion to that effect.
So move.
Second.
Thank you so much. All in favor?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. That's unanimous. Okay, moving on. If I can have a motion for the approval of the September 23rd, 2025 minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion from Commissioner Myers, second from Commissioner Fisher. All in favor? Okay, unanimous. Moving on, we have some public input. Are there any members of the public here to address the committee on any topic on the agenda? Seeing none, we're gonna move on to committee discussion. And first, before we start, from a staff perspective, since we have Mayor Gertz here, I want to kind of kick it over to him because I know we had our initial meeting, this last meeting. I guess it was September 23rd. And there was a lot of conversation related to the charge. So I wanted to kind of kick it off to Kelly, to see if he had any comments related to the charge, any clarifications he wanted to share.
Thanks, Sarah, and I appreciate everybody being here early on a Friday morning. I feel like we need to up our coffee game here at City Hall, but other than that,
Seriously.
glad to be here. Just want to sort of highlight the central core of our mission here today. And that really is the public rights of way and allowable uses. I know, having done some work, the attorney's office is going to present, some sort of other tools within the policy toolbox, perhaps that are adjacent to definition of right of way. And I'm glad for that to be kind of part of the engagement today. But really the two big functional activities that we're getting at are in the second and third bullet points of C, which is basically the danger of laying down or sitting down on a space that's meant for moving, right? So, you don't want, somebody's Doc Martens coming into contact with somebody's jaw, right? That's not healthy, nor my bicycle tire, nor the tire of my car, right? None of that is good for the public, or any member thereof. And then, the other piece that, I know might involve some operational or even kind of fiscal decision, is basically having material upon those same rights of way, in a manner that is unsightly and again, dangerous if people are just trying to pass and they're tripping over things. So that's really the core of this. Understandable that, other stuff gets associated with this, questions of First Amendment activity and free expression, but that's a different matter that's different than what's in front of us now.
Kelly, to clarify on the debris and material storage on the public rights of way, material storage, are you talking about for a length of time, or if I happen to be up at the corner waving signs for an election and put my backpack down, is that material storage?
So I think what the committee needs to discuss, with consultation with the attorney's office, is sort of where that legal bright line is between, hey, I'm hanging out here, I've got my bags, I've got the stuff that is functionally involved in the activity, versus I've just left a bunch of stuff and departed from it for some period of time.
Yeah, so that's what I was kind of getting at. When you are thinking material storage, you're talking about, I go up there and I leave my backpack and my stuff there and I go off for a while. And I leave it there without an accompaniment of a person.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, no, and yeah, I mean, clearly there's a difference between somebody's accompanying their luggage or their backpack versus somebody just left a bunch of stuff
Yeah.
for some unknown period of time. And I think the decision for this committee will be like, okay, well, what's the appropriate amount of time after which you have to say, all right, we're gonna have to tag and store this material. So it's not just hanging out here, providing an impediment to people walking to work or class, or to dinner. Does that help?
That helps.
Any other committee members have questions related to the charge? Okay. Well then moving on, just to kind of give you all a preview of what staff has prepared to kind of discuss with y'all today. So we've requested at the last meeting some data from the police department associated with relevant, events. So particularly, looking at obstruction of sidewalks and businesses. And so, our Deputy Chief Harrison Daniel will first kind of give you an overview of the data that they were able to prepare from ACCPD. And then we're gonna move on to the attorney's office, it's gonna kind of share what ordinances we currently have on the books related to this topic. And then we're gonna kind of pivot and go into what some peer communities are doing. So that's kind of the flow for today, and then we'll hopefully be able to gather next steps and what we want to learn more about, Commissioner Myers and Commissioner Fisher. So if that sounds good with everybody, we'll go on and kick it over to Deputy Chief Daniel to kind of talk through the data.
Thanks, Darren. Good morning. So we were asked to look at potential data specifically for how many times we have dealt with obstruction of sidewalk, particularly in whether the person was blocking ingress or egress of businesses. So just a caveat to that, we don't cleanly or easily track that data. It's just not how we track the data in our system. And so I want to say that before I provide a few numbers. But we were able to come up with a few data points that might help give you all a little bit of understanding or context for the issue as we see it from the police department's perspective. So because we don't cleanly track data in that granular of a method, we went to municipal court and asked them for their numbers of citations for that specific charge in county ordinance, which is 3523. Now, that could be because somebody was obstructing free passage or movement down the sidewalk, or it could be because they were blocking the ingress or egress of a business. And so this data doesn't distinguish between those two things. But what you'll see in the numbers on your paper is from January 1 of 2024 until year to date as of September 30th, we had issued 12 citations specifically under County Ordinance 3523, which is obstructing sidewalk. So that's a, rougher, more or less 21-month period, 12 citations issued under that statute. Of those, there were 8 arrests associated with those calls. But all 8 were in conjunction with some other criminal offense that was going on. So the person wasn't arrested for County Ordinance 3523. They were arrested for another criminal offense that was arrestable, and then they were also charged at the same time with violation of that ordinance. Moving further down the paper, I'm sorry, this is a lot of words, but what you'll see toward the bottom is because we don't cleanly track specifically in our CAD data or our DSS servers, that charge itself, what we did is they pulled up an estimation of calls, which resulted in a significant number of calls specifically for sidewalks. So they had to use a keyword search. And in doing that, then our crime analysts did a manual review of the calls for service and determined there were approximately 69 calls over the same time period, which is January 1, 2024 until September 30th, 25, that were likely identified as associated with obstructing sidewalks or that particular ordinance. But those didn't all result in citations, but we had some kind of call for service they believe was associated with that type of complaint. Specific, they did a word or keyword search for door, trying to figure out if they could determine if there was a way to distinguish whether the obstruction was specific to ingress and egress of a business. And when they did that, it yielded over 1,000 calls with narratives. That was just a little too time consuming and burdensome to do a hand read of all of those calls, so they had not done that. So I can't provide any more on whether or not the obstruction of sidewalk calls were related to anything with ingress or egress of businesses, but that's the data as we can present it. Again, with the caveat that we don't cleanly and accurately track it specific to ingress or egress of businesses. So I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has them.
So those larger numbers, I mean, the original numbers were specifically downtown. These larger numbers, they were not, isolated in downtown.
That's also downtown.
That's also downtown?
It is, but
Okay.
what's at the top, the
Oh,
number
yes, I see
12?
that. Sorry, I missed that.
Right, the number 12, that's how many times a citation was issued.
Okay,
And so the total calls for service they were able to say were likely associated with obstructing sidewalks, roadways, or potentially business access. That number 69 calls for service were not necessarily associated with a citation, but there
Right.
was some kind of call data to indicate we received a complaint, our officers responded for something related to obstructing sidewalks, roadways, or a business.
but just to clarify, since many of us are in the same seats as we were in yesterday for the LRC meeting, where we were talking about noise downtown, we're not looking at specifically downtown. So, right, I mean, this was from.
It should be
the-
countywide.
It's
It is, yeah.
countywide, right, so I just want to clarify that, and so the data is like, this doesn't include any, would we have any references to sidewalk that were conducted in the east side or the west side? Right, so I just want to clarify that for our discussion.
Yeah, and if we misunderstood what y'all were asking for, that's.
Oh, no, I don't know I can't remember.
And what was the ask? What was the ask there? I mean,
So I was at the last meeting, but in looking at this, at the minutes, my understanding is that, I believe it was Commissioner Davenport that had requested data on the topic. I don't know that he specified particularly downtown, but we were talking about conversations related to downtown. So I think it was probably just like inferred downtown.
Well,
But is it possible to expand it, Deputy Chief?
regardless, the work task is a countywide charge.
Right,
Correct.
You know, whether
right.
you're on Alps Road or.
Yeah.
Well, just so I understand, when you asked municipal court for their numbers, did you specify where the citations were issued, or did you just ask for any citation that was issued under that code section? So,
I didn't personally ask, our crime analyst did. I don't know exactly what their question was.
yeah, because it's easy enough for them, because they do track the specific code section or ordinance section that's cited. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is all of the cases, and it just so happens that these 8 were all downtown. I mean, I can't say that for certain, because I didn't ask for a specific municipal court, but we can follow up with them and see if there are any additionals, and just, even discuss it in this meeting, or even send out an email to say
Yeah,
whether there were any additional cases, because when they have this address here, but their system just checks not by address, but then they do have the address of the incident, but they are looking at the code section.
And then, that's where you have the greatest density of pedestrian activity all around.
Right, and again, these are instances where they have to be asked to move and don't move, because they're only cited after that. So you could have hundreds or thousands of instances where they asked them, they moved, and weren't cited. And that's what you're discussing in the call log,
Right.
but, these are just the ones where ultimately the citation was issued.
yeah, and I really just wanted to bring that up because the data
Good point.
indicated downtown, and many of us were in here yesterday talking about downtown, but that this is countywide that we're looking at.
Okay, well then I will write that down as a takeaway. We'll loop back in municipal court just to confirm that there's no other cases that we didn't already capture. And then, we'll bring that back to the committee at the next meeting. That sounds good to everyone. Are there any other questions related to the data that you shared? Okay. We'll hear none. We'll go on and move on to our next portion, with the attorney's office. Now, I just want to kind of share with everyone on the committee, staff has looped back after the last meeting, and, Courtney Davis, who is our senior attorney with our attorney's office, she referenced in the last meeting, there's over 100 references to right-of-way within our code section. So as you can imagine, as we're kind of thinking through where do we go from here, there is a large likelihood that there could potentially be some adverse impacts if we are clarifying a definition for right-of-way that would extend across all of our code sections. That would take a lot of work to make sure that we don't accidentally have a definition that conflicts with what the intent of the original ordinance language was. So as we kind of loop back as staff, one of the recommendations you're going to hear from us is that there may be an opportunity to expand some language within our existing obstruction or ordinance for sidewalks and public spaces that may meet the intent of this charge, especially as it pertains to, as Mayor Gertz referenced, the danger in laying upon or sitting upon the right of way, and the debris and material storage upon public rights of way. So that's kind of where we kind of want to start this conversation, is what are those existing ordinances that we have pertaining to that? Because there may be opportunities to meet the letter of the charge within expanding and strengthening that existing language without, hopefully, with us avoiding potential adverse impacts to other code references. So that's from a non-attorney. So I'm going to turn it over to our actual attorney.
Such a good setup. Sarah was perfect. All right, let me orient you to your little packets and then we'll go through. So your first page is the 3523 ordinance that Chief Deputy Harrison was referencing. So that is sort of our primary tool to deal with this issue that's come before us. I'll talk to you about why that section's highlighted in a minute. The second page is just some additional ordinances that may come into play. Some our litter sort of our ordinance, our abandoned property, which includes personal property and parks. Alex is here, he can speak to that. They have a system for tagging things left behind and things like that. Abandonment of personal property within the public right of ways. And then permits required, Ronnie, this is probably, out of TPW with regard to items left in a right of way. Like if you're going to encroach in a right of way, what requires a permit? Just the first section of that, just so you can orient yourself. Okay, and so what follows that, at the top of each page is the community from which this came. All right, so first we look to sort of other encroachment upon sidewalk, ordinances. I've included Rome's just to give an idea. But honestly, and you didn't ask for that, so I don't want to throw people off with the titles of the ordinances that follow from Rome, Gainesville, and Atlanta. But a lot of the language that it seems like you're looking for is contained within urban camping ordinances throughout the state. Okay, and that's because they also address improper uses of public space. And I think there's a good opportunity to look to these other communities for expand the definition in our 3523 of what interference with ingress and egress is, with what public area is defined as, and to incorporate the storage of personal property. So again, I'm not presenting these to you to suggest that that we're dealing with urban camping. I'm bringing them in because they really contain, I think, language that gets to what you want to. And to the greatest extent, I've gone through them and sort of highlighted what I think might be language to sort of consider. I mean, Gainesville and, and Atlanta's are actually very similar, like pretty good definitions about what are bridges, what are controlled access highways, what are public streets. So I think those are important to look at. I didn't go through and highlight Atlanta's. It's very, very, very similar to Gainesville's, almost the exact same. So I'm just presenting those to you guys as an opportunity and a recommendation to use your existing 3523 and really expand out ingress, egress, personal property storage, things like that.
Okay. Well, Courtney, do you mind taking us through our existing ordinances?
Sure.
Let's start there.
Well, we'll just start. 3523 is really where everything lies. And you'll see that this first section A is obstructing public sidewalks or streets shall be unlawful for any person to remain upon any public sidewalk, street, or road so as to obstruct, hinder, or impede free passage upon the same, or to obstruct, hinder, or impede free ingress or egress from any place, business, institution, public housing, or property. To Will's point, after having been directed by police to move away therefrom, depart or given free passage. That's an important part of ease obstruction. The second part of this ordinance is prowling. Will and Harrison could speak to this more. This mirrors really the state statute with regard to loitering and prowling. And I know we use the word loitering sort of colloquially, like we have a common definition of that, but it actually has a really a very specific legal definition. And so, well, that's correct, right? This is basically the state statute restated in our ordinances.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, I think that particularly those highlighted, that highlighted section A, I think that's where you have the opportunity to really get into defining things more and the ability to really address this personal property storage. You know, I think that's where you could do. You know, Alex may be best to speak to on the following page, sort of like on 11022, that's in the parks and about sort of, that's the ordinance that addresses abandoned property in parks. And they have a system to address that.
They do.
So you may, if you want to talk about that, Alex, a little bit.
Should we do it now? Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, so I spoke in this last meeting, again, I'm misrepresented 72 hours, but when there are, within the parks, with any property that's been charged to leisure services is how the 110.1 reads, the definitions. And we kind of talked about that. So for greenways, firefly trails, natural surface trails, and defined parks is where the 110s are, come into play. Whenever someone brings to our attention that somebody is using the park in that manner, whether it's storage of stuff, and it could just be an abandoned car, it doesn't necessarily have to be owned property of someone that is without a home. But so we go out, we check on it. Once we've checked on it, if it's somebody that is unfamiliar with all the resources in town, we connect them with Advantage Street Outreach. That's something that we do. Then we will move in. I brought samples, so if anybody wants one, but we actually do sticker. And on the sticker, it specifically has the 11022 and it specifically has the 11026. So with that, you can really see the.
Yeah, right here. So you really see, so you get a 72-hour warning. That 72-hour warning is 72 not weekend hours. So if it's a Friday, it'll actually be the Wednesday, the full warning back. Most people see the sticker, they know it, they know to move along with their things. If it's somebody who's not at their stuff, we're not able to get to their stuff. Usually word on the street. We usually talk to people who may be in the area, maybe share that word. And this,
whether it's Athens-Clarke Park, Sandy Creek Nature Center, Sandy Creek Park, again, this is any of our facilities that we're responsible for. And from this, then we come back. If the stuff is still there, then we work to remove it after that point. And if the stuff, and I usually have this conversation with anybody who's residing there, take the good stuff and you can trash, we'll come pick up the trash. And so we'll also sometimes show up and it's like the tent's gone, and the clothing's gone, but there may be some trash for us to pick up and we'll usually do that.
so that's the process for the 110s, the park properties.
And Alex, correct me if I'm wrong. So obviously we have an ordinance defined, but it is that people are not allowed to leave an abandoned property in a park. But in terms of the time limit and the procedure that we've done, that's an administrative policy that we've implemented to try to give as much grace as possible to make sure that we're connecting people who may be in hills with resources to where they have someplace to go and they have the ability to take their belongings with them. But those administrative policies
Don't necessarily require commission action to change. If there is intent from the committee that you do think that amount of time is too much grace or too short of grace, I would suggest that you can share that and we can pass it along to the manager, because administrative policies we can modify as needed. But in terms of the ordinance, I mean, it basically just outlines, and you can see it here in 1-10-22, that abandoned property is not allowed and can be removed. So if it was the intent of the manager and the body of the commission to where we were to limit that and reduce it, we could. But I think this is a good model in terms of this is how we typically would approach it. Even in other spaces outside of parks, we still try our best to try to connect people with their property and provide notice. There are times that we may sticker even in other spaces as well.
Yes, and there's an exception to this. In the instance very similar to what was on the front page, if the person is in the middle of the greenway or the property is in the middle of the greenway or in the middle of a program space or blocking egress to a park facility or creating some hazard, right? We've had situations where somebody would erect something around an outdoor denser unit for an air conditioner, and that will ruin the air conditioner, so we had to act on it immediately. So there are certain times where we do act more immediate when it's not safe for the person, it's not safe for the park users as well.
Right.
And one other caveat, and that administrative policy is informed by removal of the items by, typically by a contracted company because of the risk to, like, this is like a workers' comp conversation that happened. So we don't store the stuff, and that's because there might be some chain of custody, some liability. And so if that were to, just to add that to the conversation, we don't store the stuff typically, and that's just what our guidance has been in the past.
Well, and to be almost even more direct, there are at times where there may be in belonging needles, there may be drug paraphernalia that in the effort and attempt to move or store, you could inadvertently have a staff member accidentally get stuck or harmed in the process.
Correct.
So that's part of the reason why they sticker the belongings. But I know this is a bigger conversation around how do we want to approach it for public right of way. But I do want to shift a little bit unless, are there questions related to the park portion?
Well, just to clarify, this, when they're removed and impounded, it's, someone else comes, there's another contracted group that comes and gets this. What do they do with it?
It is, after the 72 hours, they get the full 72 hours. It is typically not at that 72 hours where we show up to remove the stuff. We schedule it, there's typically like another day in there, but it is disposed of. We do not store it.
Okay, it's not storage. I thought there was some
Yeah, so
discussion the last time
Yeah,
about
but
some storage.
there has been times, especially when it's like a bicycle or something where it's clearly something like a durable good. We try to work with people on that. But most times when it's like a bag of stuff, again, and we have protocol, like you wear specific gloves because of fentanyl, you wear specific gloves because of, I mean, there's certain, and I'm not saying everybody's like, I'm just saying like for staff safety,
Yeah.
we want to be as proactive as possible.
And certainly it's in the purview of the committee to recommend a storage protocol.
100%.
If you want to say, hey, we don't want it on the street or the greenway for more than 12 hours. But, what you might think of as the trade-off is, hey, we want to recommend funding a trailer or charm, with plastic bins, and we want to store that for up to 3 days at that location. That's something we could recommend, and then obviously we'd have to work with staff to talk through operationally what that looks like.
Yeah, and it sounded like from the last meeting, there was a representative from the homeless coalition. He referenced that there may be some interest from the homeless coalition in assisting with that, if that is the desire of the committee. But just in terms of where we are currently, that is a model that we have existing. But I did notice in section 5-2-20, and I don't want to preempt Courtney, there is a time limit that is established in ordinance, which is why I made that clarification related to policy versus ordinance language.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Right, and I'm assuming section 5 is solid waste, right?
So it's really more landscape, yeah.
Okay,
So
gotcha.
solid waste will handle abandoned property in the downtown area, and so you heard Suki kind of reference her litter techs oftentimes because they're downtown regularly, right? They get to know unhoused populations a lot. And so because they try to connect people with their belongings to make sure they keep them and it's still out of the way of businesses and out of the sidewalk and ingress and egress. And so there may be at times where they may keep, if it's like a bike or something that they think that they know who that does belong to at the charm, but that's not technically in ordinance, right? That's just a staff member trying to go above and beyond to connect people with their property. So I do think that there's some more clarification that the committee can share related to how we want to think about abandoned property. That may be this meeting, that may be a future meeting, but currently within our code section, it would be considered, Courtney, abandoned property if it's more than 96 hours.
On the streets and sidewalks within
Yes.
the right of way.
Yeah. And so there may be opportunities for the debris portion that is included in the charge to expand language here as it pertains to where, right?
Mhm.
So right now it limits it to streets and sidewalks. And also the time limit.
And that's different from your time limit, which is abandoned property in a park, which
Correct.
if you look at 110-22, there's no time frame. It just says if you abandon a vehicle or other personal property in a park, it shall be removed. It doesn't
Correct.
say-
Right, which could be 2 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right,
and,
you guys-
and again, that flexibility is nice when that thing happens to be right in the middle of where, the bike ride is coming through or the door to the park, or, it's at the nature center, we're about to take a whole group of school
Mhm.
kids through there. It's nice to have that flexibility just from the operational side.
Vic, I see you.
Yeah, so, thinking about this from the transit perspective, we also need to consider the safety and security of storing items that we are unsure of, what are the contents in this bundle. Years ago, not too long after 9/11, the FTA really put out a lot of guidance saying that transit agencies should not store items that they are not confident in, the contents of. So from the transit perspective, we do not store items unless it's like clearly advisable or something like that. Just because our facilities are accessed by the public, if it has the potential to either be an explosive or some type of chemical device, we could be endangering a larger amount of people than what we actually realize.
I have that point to talk about later, but I'll jump on that as well. So, I would be cautious about prescribing something too specific, because again, if we're doing the Star Spangled Classic at Athens-Clarke Park, we sweep that entire facility to make sure that there is nothing of that nature. Also for the holiday parade, same thing, like we sweep the right of where we don't, these guys help us. But you have to think about that type of bag property that might be left out in public right of way as well.
Okay.
Yeah, and I really hate to take it that route, but at times there could be some malicious actions by people, just in general.
Or you even think about the reports of cell phone batteries or laptop batteries.
Right,
that
yeah.
catch fire. I mean, that's not an uncommon phenomenon.
Very accurate.
But we're not back to this charge. We're talking about the breadth of the public right of way. So we're not talking about items left on buses, right? That's not part of
bus stops?
Yeah, bus stops.
But a bus stops.
Bus stops would be in the right.
Would be
Right,
right.
bus stops would be,
So let me, I've been listening, this is the first time I've been at this meeting. So we have an ordinance in place.
Yes, sir.
So it seems to me, that we need to be able to give, our officers, let them do their job. I mean, if we got something already in place, and I'm not sure where we need to go with this, but we got something on play, don't we just need to enforce it? What we got in place? Or are we trying to tighten, what we already got? Is that,
That's.
Yes.
so in other words, we don't have a right of way ordinance right now, is that? Because if I'm looking at this, I think we do, but are we trying to,
Maybe be more specific.
right, are we trying to be, so is this what we want to be more specific with the ordinance, and add more,
So my understanding from the last meeting, so part of the problem we're trying to solve here is I think what I heard the committee share last time was that there was a desire to kind of think about right of way beyond just simple edge of this roadway and sidewalk and bus stops, but also to think about it from edge of building to the roadway.
I get that.
And potentially impacting public spaces too, right? Because there are some public spaces that don't necessarily qualify as a park, but don't also qualify just purely as sidewalk or edge of roadway. And that, as you mentioned, extends across the county. And so I think part of the problem that we're trying to solve, and y'all correct me if I'm wrong, because it is helpful for staff to make sure that we understand what the problem is that there is a desire to make sure that the ordinance language that we have currently will address any kind of obstruction beyond just ingress and egress obstructions of the sidewalk and abandoned property obstructing the sidewalk. And so what I heard, so Deputy Chief Daniel kind of shared at the last meeting, Commissioner Fisher, that really, because as you can imagine, from a law enforcement standpoint, they're really focused on trying to get compliance, right? So they're more likely to just ask someone to move if necessary, right? But they're really gonna look at that with discretion as to how much of the sidewalk is being blocked.
correct.
Are they lying in the road? Are they entering the road? Versus is someone storing their belongings on, like, closer to the edge of the sidewalk and there's still a large portion of the sidewalk that is available. I know Alex brought up greenway trails, which are kind of this gray area spot because our bike paths are not necessarily captured explicitly within the ordinance. But y'all correct me if there's anything else kind of missing. I know we kind of treat it as park.
Well, yeah, we do. So the one
Yeah.
grayish area, imagine Willow Street, because you have
Good point.
Greenway Trail that is technically within the right of way.
So
So
that would be covered by this.
well, it's covered by the 110s because Mayor and Commission designated that as this park
Right.
responsibility. But I brought it up in the last meeting, and I might be still some of your thunder, Ronnie, but soon there will be, multi-use trails that are
Mhm.
not park property,
Got
Jefferson
it.
River, research, not research,
Right.
the Cherokee Road, there
Right.
will. So this may even now include multi-use trail.
Right, in there.
Fallacy Road forthcoming.
Thank you, yeah. those.
And this doesn't include public spaces like the,
Bus stops.
well, that might be, but maybe bus stops,
stop,
but also like
College Square.
College Square and the new park, although is that gonna be a park or a public space?
Well,
Next to
so
the Costco.
the commission would have to designate it as a park. So if desired, we could bring forward an agenda report to have y'all designate it, but as of now, it's not, right?
But either way, it's a public, I mean, we're not gonna put down College Square as a park, that's, we could, but that's.
Yeah, and-
That'd still be right of way.
Designated to the Leisure Services Department, I think is how
Right.
110-1 says it. So if ADDA is actually operating that park,
Oh,
there might be some gray areas.
There would be some unique park rules though,
Yes.
because most of the parks are closed from sunset.
Accurate,
You know,
yeah.
right, so it's,
Yeah.
that wouldn't apply to a College Square park, even if they're vacated.
Very good point.
So the title of this, public sidewalks and streets,
Right.
is too narrow from what we're saying here. And then that seems to be a problem. And then the other one, which was the 5220, the abandonment of personal property within the public right of way. 96 hours is pretty long. I would rather, that time limit of 4 days doesn't allow something like you guys are doing. That's very specific. So someone could be leaving right now their suitcase belonging, whatever they're carrying around, their stuff in. And put it in the public right of way in a way that it isn't keeping someone from walking. And it wouldn't be illegal. Is that correct?
As long as it doesn't impede their ability to walk down the sidewalk or pass down the
Right,
street,
right.
then yes, it's not against any of the
Right,
ordinances. And to some degree, creating this 5220 puts a burden almost on the county authority to give you the 96 hours. Whereas if you
It
didn't
does.
have this, if it didn't
Right.
exist at all, you could say, well, if someone's left a suitcase out there for 2 hours and,
It's abandoned.
the business owner doesn't want a suitcase out on the sidewalk, it's not obstructing the ingress and egress, but they just don't like it out there and it appears that no one's coming back for it, you could remove it, but this seems to say that you actually have to give 96 hours.
Right.
So this is a bit of a problem. And just to your question, Commissioner, I think one of the main concerns is the current obstructing of the sidewalk ordinance. You can see we only have 12 citations in a nearly 2-year period. It's not heavily utilized because it's very hard to actually obstruct a full sidewalk. This sidewalk right out here is 15 to 20 feet wide. Even if I'm laying all the way across the sidewalk asleep, there's still another 10 feet to cross. So it's very hard to actually impede somebody, even if I'm sleeping on the sidewalk. So this ordinance doesn't really address any of that behavior, even if someone is sort of camped out without a tent, that set up shop, so to speak, on the sidewalk. This ordinance doesn't allow law enforcement to ask them to move. They can't even say you need to move because you're not actually impeding anyone from making their way down the sidewalk. So
Very good point.
it's not a very effective ordinance,
So we
except in the most extreme.
To my point,
Right.
add some stuff to it, yeah.
Potentially, but I think right now, this doesn't address, that concern.
Okay.
Yeah, if you look at the Rome one, just even that word obstructing without going into the specifics versus encroachment. My gut reaction to that is that that's different. I don't know what the definition of encroachment is, but obstruction, you obstructing someone from doing something. Encroachment is a different term there,
It's very, very different.
very different term.
I mean, these weird words all mean the same thing, obstruct, hinder, impede. If you look at the Black's Law Dictionary of impede, it says to obstruct or hinder.
Yeah.
So they all mean the same thing. They mean to prevent the free passage.
Oh, obstruct, hinder, or impede, yeah.
Right, in our definition. So, and if you, to really, it needs to, in a legal sense, it needs to fully stop someone from being able to do something, which is pretty hard to do on the sidewalk. You can imagine if it was a narrow sidewalk. But to encroach upon the sidewalk, you can imagine it's just to make some sort of entry onto, even if you're not fully obstructing. So they're very different concepts.
Very good point. Thank you.
I mean, in this other one from Rome, I mean, the end of the first sentence, it does say an obstruction, to make an encroachment upon or place an obstruction, but the last part of it says without first obtaining permission from the city authorities to do so. That's,
So are we ready to go on to
oh.
the peer communities?
Yeah, I would actually,
Sorry,
you're fine. I would actually go forward to the second Rome one, the one that's pretty heavily highlighted.
Okay,
The one titled Urban Camping and Improper Use of Public Areas.
Mhm.
So to your point about sort of I mean, not that this is super, but 3-5-23, we're saying obstructing public sidewalks and streets. I mean, that could certainly be, an improper use of public areas, things like that. But I think kind of importantly in this ordinance, and it's a common ordinance, this language is in a lot of them. I think, for example, if you look at public areas, so if you refined 3-5-23 to, expand out from sidewalks, streets and roads to also public areas, you can see the lengths to which public area is defined here,
oh,
right?
right down at the bottom, yeah.
Public area, I mean, highways, roadways, below bridges, sidewalks. I mean, it's a much more encompassing definition. Further on, Atlanta actually specifically says right of way on theirs. I mean, you could definitely expand the definition of what incorporate this as a public area use, define that better. And then, as you can see, they also, the interference with ingress or egress tries to get more at this sort of like, what is, a material, if it's materially interfering with it to this level, but it also talks about the storage of personal property as being an encroachment or as an interference. So I think those are where you look to start to expand out your language to capture more area that you're looking for, and also to refine what it is to encroach. Gainesville goes even further, about in terms of defining places, public streets, public parks, controlled access, bridges, things like that.
Mediums.
Yes, sir. Yeah, medians, exactly. So you can define a pretty encompassing area, still being mindful that there's going to need to be some sort of interference with ingress and egress, but if you want to
Yeah, I
further
think
define that.
When some of us were, or Dexter was in Gainesville, and I remember someone down there talking about, in Gainesville, Florida, talking about there being, talking about medians, saying that there was someone kind of camped out on a median, which really was dangerous. I mean, the sidewalk stuff could be dangerous, but it really was dangerous, distracting and such. And that they had to change an ordinance or something to address that issue.
Okay.
Good point.
So like the islands that would create the refuge islands.
For consideration.
And that's just kind of I just wanted to give you all a general broad idea about how perhaps your current ordinance could be expanded. to
Right,
be-
right.
I want to be clear.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
That was good clarification.
I want to be clear. So,
Um,
okay, I like this. I like what Gainesville's doing.
Okay. That's what I was gonna ask. Are any of these peer communities of more interest to you in terms of definitions? As we're, because obviously the end result here is that there'll be a draft ordinance brought forward. As staff starts to prepare that, it is helpful to kind of know of this language for the definitions of public areas, which are more of interest to the committee, I would imagine. Courtney, is there other points that would be helpful to the attorney's office in taking the lead?
No,
Courtney did send me, and thank you, some
yes.
Asheville, North Carolina. has a really good, panhandle and the ordinance, something that I think, Sarah shared with, the other commissioner, Myers and, Davenport. But there's some good language in there also,
Okay,
maybe some that we may want to take a look at.
okay.
Again, but I know each state is different.
Yes, sir.
So I understand East and North Carolina and Georgia, but just not seeing this Gainesville stuff is that is good stuff.
Yes.
I can't read all of it, but I think the Asheville is
We can look at that for language as well.
Yeah.
I did see, I'm trying to remember, now I feel like I've just been looking at highlighted words for a long time.
Too many words.
So, yeah, but there was one that there was one that had a much shorter time frame for like when property is kind of considered.
actually the hour.
Yeah, an hour, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's something also to sort of think about with regard to storage of personal property that is interfering with an ingress or egress.
Committee members have sort of a sense of generally 96 hours seems a longer length than necessary. Is that?
Okay.
Yeah, that's definitely, definitely, I'd rather the operational part of that, be able to figure that out, like the parts.
Is there a better time frame that y'all have thought about? Do you feel like 72 hours is too long?
In a particular reason, y'all suggested statement two or from administrative standpoint?
Yes, and we've been using this same kind of policy all the way back to 2010, I guess, is my first interaction with it. 72 seemed like a good amount of time for people to get in contact with services if they were unfamiliar with what services were. Again, services are different now. There are more of them. There's different, but most times when we're stickering, it's somebody who's not opting into those services that are offered as well. So just 72 seems to be a sweet spot. It's quick enough to where when the public asks, why haven't you done anything about this? Because they often do. We can say, oh, you know, we're working on a process, and then they get a couple days to figure out a solution for themselves.
Now, that doesn't apply to trip, like, what you can clearly identify are like trash bags. You don't.
Oh, yeah, that's a great
Right,
point.
yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
Clearly
So-
trash.
Especially, I understand about
Yeah,
trash.
yeah.
You know, remove that.
Good point.
well, but sometimes a trash bag can have a suitcase in it. So
Well,
there
right.
is some discretion
Yeah.
that we take with it of, okay, that's somebody weatherproofing a thing of belongings. So there is a little bit of discretion of like, oh, this is definitely trash. It smells like trash. It looks like, like versus this is belongings, regardless of the smell. But
With the park,
Did a
there
lot of
were,
work last weekend. I smelled like crap.
yeah, but with the parks, there is more opportunity to seclude oneself in the parks. Where in these public spaces, that's not the same thing, so it's, I mean, well, maybe they are, but I mean, there was someone for a while who was actually camping on what seemed to be, like, it was really close to the right of way, it might have been the church over in the east side, the Presbyterian church, but it was like right there on the sidewalk, which was about like this far from Gaines School Road, like, so they were right there for several days. And I think that was into private property, but it was so close that it felt like you were, like, if you walked to Aldi's, you were like right there with the person there. So, I mean, I can imagine someone doing something, and I guess the other thing with the sitting there in the places, because that becomes an issue that we haven't gotten up to, and the exceptions as well. Is it a dangerous thing to be sitting at the entrance to a shopping area? In a wheelchair in the 100-degree weather with an umbrella over your head for, hours. And I think that was in the public right away over there on the east side.
Yeah, we got a picture.
Yeah, I mean, I passed it many times, but that.
And to highlight Rome's, where the public area definition, this is a great thing because sometimes we have run into issues with, it's like off the park property, but it's on public utilities easements.
Yes.
And so like using the term right of way is important, but I like how inclusive this public area definition includes schools even in this one, which is kind of a nice, because sometimes like our property or school property, they kind of blend together.
Mhm.
And there are also others, so Elbert Street, which is an old right of way that is, where the new ramp, Firefly goes over the new ramp onto the loop right at the interchange has been worked on. There's still a Elbert Street right of way back in the woods there. And so you wouldn't think that there's right of way, but there actually is right of way within the woods there. And so that's actually come up a couple of times. Of somebody camping on that right of way and where does it fit in all this? So people thinking it's Firefly property, but it's not.
And to your point, your earlier about sitting and standing, so, you know, where our current ordinance just talks about obstructing, hindering, or impeding. If you look to Rome's, the interference with ingress egress includes sitting, standing, lying, you know, kind of expands it out to the extent that it also still materially interferes with the ingress and egress, but it does articulate, you know, that sort of one of those physical activities that would be, you know, so about the sitting that you were just talking about.
One other nice thing about the public area definition of Rome, at the end of it, where it talks about any other area where people generally gather on a regular basis. Highland Park is not one of our facilities. And I know that just to add, we get calls about it very frequently. And again, that's owned by the HOA and anyway, just another kind of caveat or another kind of case study to think about with this.
Well, I think the private property though would take care of that though. I'm looking at some Gainesville and then
Yes, sir.
they talk about private property also.
Yes, sir.
So that,
Exactly.
so the ordinance, if we expand our ordinance, it should take care of that hopefully. Once you look at the word.
But once anyone starts, I mean, and if we get to that fourth bullet point, First Amendment rights. Once anyone gets to a point in the right of way or on the sidewalk where they have a sign and are communicating that First Amendment stuff kicks in.
So you mean, so protesters on the bridge, like out here in Jefferson?
True. Protesters on the bridge or someone saying, I'm a veteran, give me some, you know, I have some money.
Yeah.
And so maybe to kind of dive a layer deeper, and the question for the attorney's office would be, I mean, is there a circumstance when somebody's exercise of free speech rights trumps occupation of a space?
Right. That's one we're gonna have to really dig into and really get back to, because that is a much deeper, that's a much harder question.
I would take it one step further then. So I would say, when we do protests, they have to don't they have to get a permit? Protest?
Well, a lot of them are not.
Certain circumstances, yeah, if you're gonna block a street, for instance, you'd have to have a permit.
Yeah.
You can't
So,
block a street.
But I don't,
I would like us to look, okay, if you're gonna hold a sign, and you're soliciting, then I would like for us to look and say, okay, you're gonna pay for that. You're gonna solicit, we're gonna charge you a fee.
You mean so like panhandling,
Yeah.
not protest signs?
Yeah, well, even because I wanna make sure that if somebody, again, to, the solicitor's point, you know, if you protest, you have to get a permit, I think, if like if you block a street.
no,
Not all the time.
no.
But in some instances,
In some instances.
If you're blocking the street,
Like if
but
you're
if
gonna
I'm just,
utilize an entire street, like, you know, sometimes people utilize the entirety of the breadth between First American Bank and City Hall,
Right.
and they'll get a permit under those circumstances.
Yeah.
And there are circumstances under which, if you know, somebody is simply moving down the street sort of in single file, they don't have to get a permit for that activity.
okay,
And that's a somewhat adjacent area of law and,
Yeah.
and public policy. I understand where you're going.
Yeah, but if
That's something different.
but yeah, but if you're gonna solicit
Mhm.
for money, I'd like for us to take a look and see that we ask, say, part of our orders would be, okay, you have to pay for that.
Well, and that's outside of this charge. That's a different.
Is it, Mayor? I mean,
It-
you know, I think, well, part of the, ingress, I mean, part of what those people in the ingress, though, they're panhandle. I mean, some of them are paying, some of them are, to your point, maybe sleeping or got their belongings there, but I think I sort of think it's go hand in hand.
And understand how those get conjoined in the public mind, but what I'm cleaving off is the presence in public space, you know, which is like, where are you on the public space from the expression component of it.
in
But there's a
terms of all the, I think we have a disagreement, I mean, we're trying to, whether or not we like it or not, we're responding in this ad hoc committee to this charge here, which does not include, it includes those bullet points right there. So, you know, what you're saying, I mean, if somehow you could argue that that falls under one of those bullet points,
Yeah.
Commissioner, but that's what I'm saying. I mean, the danger in laying or sitting upon the right of way is reduced or eliminated, you know, laying or sitting upon. So this is a very specific charge. Now, what you're saying to the mayor is this charge needs to be broader.
Yeah,
That-
but we'll have more discussion, but yeah, yes, yeah, well, yeah.
And I think to Courtney's point, I mean, having done a little bit of research on prosecuting someone who's exercising their First Amendment right, it's extremely complicated. And I think probably would be a situation where we could sit down and have a conversation about it another time, because it could go on for a long time. There are a lot of very specific rules about how you can go about doing that. And so it would probably take more time than we have today to even just sort of start touching on it. But I'd be happy to sit down.
Yeah, I'm
because
gonna have a conversation.
I have some limited amount of experience in that and did some research at that time.
And just to sort of play off that, Will, I mean, part of the benefit of this charge is it's one that you can effect pretty quickly.
Mhm.
You know, again, by amending that language you see on the first page of the packet.
And I will say, unlike yesterday, actually, what I brought you today in terms of ordinances are ones that we feel comfortable with regard to the constitutionality. The Rome, I know, is they have been prosecuting under this ordinance for some time now and things like that. So anyway, what I've brought to you today is things that we feel really comfortable with. But I haven't had the opportunity to vet your additional questions in a way that I could speak meaningfully to it.
Sounds good. Any other questions related to the ordinances from other jurisdictions? Okay, well, if we can kind of go back to that timeline question of property, I think that's another good, like, since we have more time on our calendar, as we start to think for the next meeting, Courtney, I don't know if we're gonna be in a position where we can start to draft that potential ordinance language now that, because it seems like the committee, correct me if I'm wrong, are kind of comfortable with some of the definitions here for public areas.
Yeah, I'd like to see the attorney's office use as a
Okay.
model some of the expanded language
Yeah.
here to draft something that would be, you know, that we could adopt. And you could say, we left this out because, or we added this because,
Okay, sure.
you know.
What I'll probably do, if it's okay, is I'll probably default to including more than less and let you guys strike as we go
Okay.
through, if that works. Okay.
And then, Courtney, if you'll circulate that around for the next meeting too with staff, just in case there's any like adverse impact, because I know Suki mentioned leaf and limb sometimes impacts the right of way too, just to make sure that.
Yeah, and I'm
there's
glad
no-
Ronnie's here to
Yeah.
have his ears on all of this as
Yeah,
well.
so we'll at least have for the next meeting, hopefully that expanded draft language.
Sure.
For the definition. But I think the other piece here, and as Mayor kind of touched on, is that abandoned property piece. So I think with the time we have today, we may not get to the conclusion of how and if we are storing that property. That may have to be the next meeting with staff coming back with recommendations and options for the committee to kind of talk about. But I do think we have time to kind of talk about how does the committee feel related to what is an appropriate amount of time for us to be looking at when property should be considered abandoned, specifically thinking about belongings versus just purely trash.
Okay, so for an average person, and you leave something on the street, you are feeling like you're taking a risk, like you're saying, I'm taking this, but I need to run in there and get a coffee, and I'm gonna use the restroom. I'm gonna go like, I don't really feel good about leaving my stuff there, right? So for me, like, I don't want to abandon like, it feels irresponsible for me to not prudent to abandon my stuff for any period of time, right? So I'm just making that point. So then if you go further along that way, But then it's just, you know, having ridden my bike with stuff on it and leaving it somewhere where I do go in because I have it all there. I want a few minutes. So,
Sounds like great ordinance language.
So what I hear you saying is like you're probably closer to the hours versus like the.
yeah,
2
it
hours
just seems like,
versus
yeah,
an extended period of
My
time.
question is, do we need to constrain ourselves to a particular
Time.
amount of time? Because I think the amount of time is what's reasonable in the circumstances. If my bike is locked up, even if it's on the sidewalk, if it's locked
oh,
up.
yeah, right, I didn't include that.
Right,
That's
am I really expected to come back and get it within 4 hours or
Yeah,
9 hours?
Yeah, and I hadn't even thought of that.
A day.
Good point.
But if I leave, 10 giant boxes of who knows
Right.
what unmarked on the street, it's not completely blocking the sidewalk or the street, but it's sitting there. How many hours? Is it 96? It doesn't seem reasonable. Is it even 8? That doesn't seem reasonable. So it seems like it's based on the circumstances. So I hate to make it, less specific than a number of hours, but it really seems like it's reasonable based on circumstances. If you got a call about a suspicious package, you wouldn't wait 96 hours.
No.
Like a suspicious package.
Right.
So I hate to remove the really specific language, but it seems like we should be more moving towards a reasonable period of time under the circumstances.
Okay.
Because
Yeah,
So,
each set of circumstances, the bike may get to sit out there for weeks. Because it's not unreasonable that someone could park their bike. They might live downtown and you
Right.
might think it's been sitting there for weeks, but maybe they move it every couple of days. It's locked. It's a perfectly reasonable thing to do to lock your bike to a bike rack, but.
or even a pole when there are not, I mean, I like that's unintended consequences, and I like thinking of that.
So I would agree with that. It's a lot of times, to me, it's gonna be situation dependent as to what's reasonable, what would be a reasonable amount of time. Just a quick read of the two, Rome and Gainesville ordinances that y'all are looking at. One has a 1 hour minimum or a maximum, I suppose, and the other doesn't specify at all, similar to, our park property issue. And, it would just be.
Which one has the 1 hour?
Rome, it says storing personal property unattended for more than 1 hour.
yeah,
But then the Gainesville has no time frame on it. It just says any storing of property, at least from my quick read on it. If I missed something, forgive me, but.
And
and there's
interesting that,
exemption to
yeah,
the Rome ordinance for, bicycle parking and things like
but
that.
but it's only bicycle parking in an approved bike stand or designated area.
Gainesville does have a 1 hour in there, actually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But again, it's, to me, it's situation dependent as to what's reasonable. And, something is blocking 50 or 60% of a sidewalk and it's a bunch of piled boxes. I don't know if we want to leave it there for 96 hours.
But
Or
even
even
if you could get
24 for that
around it,
matter,
even if
depending
you-
on what it is.
Yeah, even if you can move around.
But who can get around? Because
Right.
nothing
That's
is
right.
ADA.
Yeah,
is written
ADA
this year.
issues, yeah.
Yeah, because, a
Mhm.
5-foot sidewalk that's 50% obscured is not ADA compliant. at that
Right.
point. So,
accurate.
I think
And
that's
so a
important.
committee option could be to recommend no number,
Right.
but indicate to staff that they wish for procedural language that allows them to act as efficiently as possible.
Is that kind of how the committee is feeling? We good with that kind of approach?
yeah, I want, yeah, and I just, I want to make sure that police or code enforcement could respond to something, feel that they are empowered to respond to something that's where something has been abandoned, left unattended for 4 hours in the middle of the day or an hour, 2 hours, and it's just weird, why in the world is there? So,
Deputy Chief, you and I kind of touch on, do you feel comfortable with that discretion being left to the officer? Are there any kind of challenges that you foresee or concerns that you may have, or?
So wide open discretion, the challenge for that would be inconsistency in application. But we could certainly, work with the manager's office and others for some procedural constraints.
Okay.
that would be fine. And that would, to me, that would answer the inconsistency problem.
Right.
And I would imagine that central services and DPW staff would probably want to be in the loop on whatever those procedures were.
Right.
They would,
Correct.
yes.
Yeah.
Solid waste.
And there are clearly, I mean, there are clearly other examples where someone has lost something, like you find a wallet, it's clearly mislaid, it's not abandoned.
Right.
They didn't need to put it
Right.
there. And the police department and other authorities respond to that very differently. If you find a
Correct.
purse that's just hanging, on a bench, you know that the person didn't need for it to be there, it was not on purpose. So that's not property that's deemed abandoned because under the circumstances, it's clearly just mislaid.
Mhm.
Yeah, if we were held to it like for example, the 96-hour thing, there's been several times where the property was abandoned with us after having been stolen. And so we were actually acting on our, with wonderful help with PD, found people's stolen property out of accident. So, days matter with stuff like that. So I love the idea of not having an hour restriction, like a
Yeah.
96-hour in the ordinance portion.
Okay. Well, then it sounds like we will also include that in our draft ordinance is the amendment for that code section to make sure we are removing that to provide some flexibility and guidance. Is there anything else that we want to either cover today, talk about, any lingering questions from the committee?
Ronnie, did I miss anything in TPW with regard to a time limit on how long you leave something that's encroaching?
No,
Okay.
thank you. I haven't said much and let me comment on, the model ordinance for the example you provided. I am sure in support of this level of detail. Definitely we need it. The world have changed and this is necessary today just to cover all the scenarios that we come across and we can't, necessarily specify the violation that somebody may have done. And so, this would be greatly helpful, especially for bridges and, camping under bridges. This scenario, we had to kind of morph kind of a policy, so it would work in the advantage of relocating someone who has been living under a bridge.
Excellent.
Committee members, are there questions that you have or information that you want to learn more about at the next meeting?
No, I feel like this is good and that Courtney's gonna come back with something and,
I'm gonna wow y'all next.
yeah.
So,
I mean, really.
kind of my plan for the next meeting, if y'all are in agreement, is what I hear as some takeaways. So first, we're gonna look and confirm with municipal court to make sure there were not other additional cases that expanded beyond downtown. So we'll bring that back if there are some, or at least bring an update. And then I think, obviously we'll have the draft ordinance language with that expanded definition of what constitutes this public area, where this would be, obviously this ordinance would apply, but also have that flexibility in terms of timeline for abandoned property. And then probably the bulk of our conversation, I want to kind of get with staff and prepare some options related to how we could approach that abandoned property, whether it be if the community does desire to store it, what that would look like. If the committee is interested, I can reach out to the homeless coalition to see what their level of interest is and potentially invite them. But I really want to make sure central services and solid waste are at the table because they tend to do the bulk of collection of abandoned property. And so I want to kind of think through what those operational concerns, but maybe if we can focus at the next meeting on that abandoned property piece, what the interest is of the committee in terms of how we manage that. How does that sound?
That sounds good.
Okay.
Is there anything that has to be talked about?
And really, may I bring up the thing about on the here that put First Amendment rights, offers a special event, so I brought up the fact about, about the panhandle piece.
And the danger in lying upon or sitting upon the right of way is reduced or eliminated. Does that have to be clarified what becomes a danger? I mean, that's so eliminate the public safety of pedestrians. I mean, does that need clarification from you? I mean, what does that mean? I mean, if you're talking about, if you're talking about getting by someone, that needs to be a distance, include the ADA. Is that all we're talking about there? The danger line of,
Generally, Carol, intent is to sort of eliminate the wiggle room. Because presently, an officer could say like, oh, well, geez, you can get a wheelchair by that sidewalk despite the fact that somebody's laying here, somebody's laying here, somebody's sitting
Right.
there. And this says, no, the sidewalk's just not a place for sitting. Outside of, a special event activity, where you may have a permit, and there may be somebody sitting down listening to a band play. And so this says, rather than.
Wait,
have
this
them-
your thing says?
What I'm suggesting to
Yeah.
you through this language here is that, we sort of eliminate this discretion and the officer having to figure out, well, could you get a wheelchair through there, to instead say, well, you should not have to worry about the question in the first place.
So
Because we
any
define
kind
this
of
as
sit-
not a place outside of the context of, event, or, maybe you're waiting for your, sibling to get out of the
Okay,
store with their bag.
So I'm just giving you an example. So that's broader than I thought. I thought it was that the danger had to be clarified what it was. So I'm giving you a real example because I've done this many times during election season for many candidates and for many reasons. I've gone up to the corner of College Station and Barnett Shoals, or Barnett Shoals and Gaines School. And sometimes I have brought a folding chair. So under this, that would be illegal.
Not necessarily.
Why not? Because I'm not,
Because what you're doing is primarily being involved in a speech activity. And that's why, we talked earlier about, there are times when the speech activity trumps the presence. This is primarily focused on.
okay, so
physical
let me give you
presence.
another one that wasn't that. I'll give you another one. I just want to know if it was illegal. Back when we had that two-way, I don't really think the police are gonna come after me for this all the time, but they could, they could, like the two-way thing. And, on Barnett Shoals, and people were saying, this is, taking me a half hour to get through this light. And I was like, that's ridiculous. So I went up there with a chair and sat there and counted how long it took to get through the red light. So that would not be free speech, but that would be illegal if I was sitting partially in the sidewalk.
I mean, I think that if I may,
Mhm.
I still, and maybe I'm wrong, but I still contemplate the ordinance being that you're interfering with the ingress and egress of it. If you're just sitting off on, you're not obstructing anybody from going down the sidewalk or
Right,
things
right.
like that. I mean, I think that there still have to be a material interference with the
Okay, but
ingress.
you're not, but I thought what the mayor was saying, he was just making it so the danger in lying or sitting upon is reduced or eliminated for the public safety of pedestrians or motorists alike.
And
So-
the
so-
liars, I mean, the.
Right, but does that, I guess what you just said indicated to me that you thought any kind of sitting or lying would be, that would clarify it as an obstruction. So where in the ordinance itself says to obstruct, hinder, or impede free passage along that, you're not suggesting are you suggesting we change that or not change it?
So I am suggesting that we reduce the incidence of sitting in line. Now, in every law, and your attorney said, there is always some ambiguity. And so, in the example you gave of, I'm sitting here to kind of monitor the number of people who are passing on bike on the cycle track. There's a public policy intent or a, public purpose in that sitting on that folding chair to count the number of passersby. That would be different than outside of the context of a public policy purpose, an individual simply sitting on the sidewalk for an extended period of time on Gaines School Road. And I would suspect that both from a prosecutorial perspective, as well as from a policing perspective, the prosecutor and the police would be able to discern the distinction between those activities.
Okay.
I guess, these are smart folks.
Well, and what I heard Will suggest is even by changing the language from obstruct, hinder, or impede to something like encroach, could provide a little bit more flexibility in terms of officer discretion. Or at least in what would apply. Is that fair? I'm probably messing up.
I mean, I'm
the
looking at the Rome ordinance again. has a lot of detail, and it's talking about interfering with the ingress or egress. So it's still requiring more than just being present
Got
in some way. And so I think you'd still have to look at, if we were talking about adopting something similar to this or something similar to what Gainesville was doing, they were still fairly careful to say it has to materially interfere or reasonably appear to be interfering. And so I think it would depend on the circumstances.
Right.
I do also think you could make exceptions under certain circumstances, and you don't want to get too carried away with the exceptions, but I do think you could make exceptions. You're gonna have to make exceptions for the situation you're talking about where you sit on a sidewalk with a candidate sign. I mean, there, people who stand there all day and we're telling them they can't sit down. I mean, they brought a chair, so I think you'd have to have some exceptions in that, in terms of the way you enforce it. But yeah, I mean, that's I think bringing up every example you can think of where this would be reasonable behavior that we don't want to prohibit.
Yeah, and that's.
But we would be prohibiting by adopting this. I think that's a good exercise because anytime you adopt a new ordinance or statute, there are always unintended consequences.
Right.
It's the other people that sit in chairs every day in school crossing guards, right?
Yeah.
In that same
Yeah.
intersection, so make sure they're.
So if you look at these, they do have exemptions built into them, and that would be something to consider as well, what exemptions you'd be willing to make for obstructing the sidewalks or laying down or anything like that. I have a question, would it be helpful, from y'all's perspective? So right now, our ordinance is just free passage upon or along the same, so obstructing, hindering, or impeding free passage, but adding just any portion of the sidewalk, or with that little language, would that change this issue where this person's obstructing 5 feet, but not the other 5 feet? So I could walk around them right now and it's really not necessarily practically in violation of this ordinance, but if it was any portion of that sidewalk, that helped? I mean, from a prosecutorial perspective.
It doesn't help address the question Commissioner Myers asked where, if I'm sitting halfway on the sidewalk with a chair, I'd still be in violation of that. But it does sort of address, I think, what the mayor is pointing out as an issue. If you're lying on the sidewalk, that's unsafe for really everyone involved. Now, I could not be looking, not realize there's someone lying across the sidewalk, and step on them, but there could be if I'm lying on a bike path, it's obviously extremely dangerous for everyone involved. So yes, and it is probably the simplest way to fix it. And certainly would allow officers to walk up to someone and not have to guess, is this ADA compliant? Can a wheelchair pass through here? But just say, you're impeding some portion of the sidewalk, you have to move. That would be certainly one way to address the problem.
I think that exemptions list, that's a helpful.
Yeah. Is there anything, I mean, in terms of fear of going around, this is sort of legal stuff here? Because I would imagine there were people say, well, if someone's lying on that sidewalk, it's really weird. I'm afraid of going over there. And therefore they're obstructing I mean, is there any, is that legally defensible? Or would that, I mean, do you see what I'm talking about?
Yeah, so
here?
what you're getting into is loitering or prowling, probably. Do you think, well, I mean, Will would be the one to prosecute in this case.
Yeah,
It's
it's in the same code section, actually. It's the second code section. Actually, it occurred to me, we probably should ask when we followed municipal court, when we asked about violations of 3523, were we only asking about subsection A, or did they ask about both A and B?
So they did look at that, as far as I understand, they did, check for that, they looked at the content of the case.
Sometimes sometimes you have the subsections on the citations, sometimes it's just the general ordinance. And if you look at the list of this list of 8 cases, it lists obstructing public sidewalks, streets, but it also says dash prowl. So it might include both violations, and even the call list, one of the calls says loitering. So, that would probably be better addressed in that situation where you're causing, alarm and concern. That requires the officer to speak to the person, dispel the alarm, before taking action. So I do think there is a reasonableness standard in the law, so for instance, simple battery prohibits me from offensively touching someone. You might find this touch offensive, but reasonably, it's not offensive. So I wouldn't be charged with simple battery, even if you personally found it offensive, it's unreasonable. So I think there's still a reasonable standard when you're talking about the alarm that's caused by something. Seeing someone that he has a beard and it makes me uncomfortable, that's obviously not reasonable. So I think there's still a reasonableness standard for both the officers when they're deciding whether to cite, and then the prosecutors and the county attorneys when we're deciding whether not to go forward with the case.
But that kind of loitering and prowling sort of is somebody being in an unusual space. Something that sort of, it feels weird. Why are you here? What are you doing? Kind of thing. That's kind of that gut feeling you have is what is a loitering and prowling.
Yeah, they're creating an alarm for the safety of people or property in the area.
Okay. Well, for the sake of time, so let's also, committee members, if y'all are willing, I think that was a great suggestion by Will Leader related to thinking about those examples of what would be reasonable, and bringing that back to the next meeting. That way we can test the ordinance language to make sure that we're capturing all of that. If there's stuff that you do think is unreasonable, bring those examples too, to make sure that it would apply. Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, with that, I think the next item on our agenda is to identify our next meeting date. Courtney, I'm gonna ask you, how long do you think you'll need for your draft ordinance? Should we give you 2 weeks?
I serve the will of the commissioners. I will do it as quickly as you want me to.
Okay, well, our last meeting was the 23rd, so you only had a week-ish between.
And look what we were able to do.
So are y'all wanting to do another meeting in a week, or are you wanting to go a little bit longer? I know we have a charge, Mayor, to have it no later than the November voting meeting. I don't know that we're gonna hit that. I will be very transparent.
And knowing the hard work and enthusiasm of this body, I'm willing to give some grace there.
Okay.
I'm gonna make that suggestion, Mayor, maybe November may be aggressive.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll definitely try to pass it out of committee kind of. How's that?
That sounds good.
Okay, so committee members, since I have 2 of y'all here, I know we don't have Patrick, we'll have to confirm with him, but is there a date that stands out for y'all? Is Friday?
That was very great for me.
Okay,
I always try to leave Fridays open.
so do y'all want to do it the 17th, the 24th?
I'd rather do it the 17th, that's 2
Okay.
weeks, just let's.
Oh, sorry, I skipped a week, I didn't even know this, oopsie. Meant to say the 10th or the 17th, that's what I get. Okay, so the 17th, does that work for y'all?
Yeah.
I have all important parking court.
Oh, no,
17th,
parking court.
sorry.
Should we do the 10th instead?
I can, if y'all can.
That's a week from now.
Has enough, you okay with it?
Yes, sir. That's fine.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't mind.
Well, then we'll convene again, next Friday, October 10th. Is this time work for y'all? 9 to 10:30?
Sure.
Okay. Well, we'll send that out. And then all I'm looking for is a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.